everyone. Welcome to another episode of The Clueless Capitalist, where we help you become less clueless with angel investing. My name is Razi.
And my name is Osman, and together we're The Clueless Capitalists.
And today we have the privilege of having Yahya and Wajeeh to join us in this particular episode. They are both the co-founders of Pattern, which is a food app that gives personalized rewards at your favorite restaurants. So Yahya and Wajeeh are based out of Lahore in Pakistan. And maybe Yahya, you could start by sharing with us, what does Pattern do?
Yeah, thanks Osman. Thanks Razi. Happy to be here. Thanks for having us. Pattern is basically about identifying buying patterns and then helping restaurants in Pakistan actually make use of the data and those consumer buying patterns to basically grow their business. So simplifying it even further, what we essentially want to do is brick and mortar restaurants, which is basically, just for some context, an $11 billion industry in annualized industry in Pakistan, which is growing, which is also the fastest growing industry in the entire country. It's growing by 20% year on year. But the problem right now is that, COVID has changed a lot of things, but, now that things are back to normal, the dine-in is here to stay, dine-in and take-out especially. It contributes to the major part of any restaurant's business over here. Now, brick and mortar restaurants are running their entire businesses, but they have no data on who their customers are, what their actually customer retention is. They've got no means to be connected to their customers. So what Pattern essentially aims to do is to bridge that gap, form that connection between the restaurant and their customers, and make sure we become the growth engine or the growth partners for the brick and mortar restaurants, help them acquire new customers and help them retain new customers and help them grow their business. So that's essentially what Pattern does.
Before the interview, as I was doing my research, right, of course, I Googled you, and what came up was the Airlift Mafia. And it mentioned you in the article and how people who have worked or been in the startup Airlift have gone on to start their own startups. And for everyone who's watching and is not aware of what Airlift is a logistics solution startup, a bit like Uber. And I think sometime last year they raised $85 million in a Series B, which is unheard of in the Pakistan startup ecosystem. And then you've gone on from Airlift to then join Dastgyr, where you were the general manager, and you scaled that up. And I think just last month, Dastgyr raised $45 million, which values them about $100 million pre-money. And you left that very recently to start Pattern. So I'm really intrigued to know as to how you see this as a big enough problem to actually leave this thriving and growing and really exciting startup called Dastgyr. So maybe, Yahya, you can share a little bit more about that.
Yeah, absolutely. Great question, Razi. Thanks for asking that. So Wajeeh and myself were both the earliest team members in Dastgyr when we started off back in 2020 amidst COVID. And the story, we're super, super close to Dastgyr, and, it was one of our best journeys in our life. And, basically that's where we learned, how to actually understand how to solve problems through technology. And then, the credit goes to the founders, Syed and Wes, who had this big vision of creating the next wave of entrepreneurs. And then, all the time we used to talk about what's the next big problem to solve, how can the early team at Dastgyr and how can the early team at Airlift, Airlift started us all, the wave of entrepreneurship that these guys have created is, we're super grateful. I think the entire Pakistani ecosystem is grateful for the early starters who actually educated everyone who worked in that organization how to actually think about scale, how to think about solving problems through technology. So back at Dastgyr, we realized that, this was such a huge problem to what Pattern is solving now. Food is the fastest growing industry in the country, and, there's delivery aggregators actually charging huge sums of commissions to the restaurants, whereby it's super unsustainable for them to work. So yeah, Dastgyr was the actually university where we actually learned everything. And then, we realized that, it's good that now we've scaled the organization. So what used to be like a 7 to 8 people organization when we started is now like has employs now more than 300 people in the company. So we realized that it's now time to probably take the plunge and actually create more impact and solve more problems. Where we can contribute. So yeah, that's what the story has been like so far.
I mean, that's really interesting. Thanks for sharing that. And I think the key word that I heard there for me was just sustainability, and the fact that what you're seeing in the market today is not sustainable for all the people within that ecosystem, both for the restaurant owner and for the delivery agent and even for the consumer, that they might like what they're doing, but if they carry on with the way that they're consuming products, the restaurant owner won't want to facilitate that anymore, and then everyone loses out. So I like that, and it's become the topic of conversation with a lot of businesses now, where they've talked about growth over everything, and now there's a big shift in mindset amongst all the major VCs that are coming in to look at what's going on in the startup ecosystem. And they're asking, how are you going to get to something that's sustainable quickly? And yet you brought that word up. So my next question really is going to be, how are you going to do this? How are you going to make sure that this is going to be something that's sustainable for the long term? And how do you plan to get to that level of sustainability quickly?
Yeah, great question, Usman. Like when we started out, so we were always like, before this economic downturn and before the recession, even at the times when there were news all over about startups raising big, which I personally believe is going to continue, because the ecosystem is a growing ecosystem. It's only like a small economic downturn in the larger scheme of things, because eventually emerging markets are definitely going to keep growing amongst other markets. So basically, we were laser focused, both Wajeeh and myself and the founding team that we have. We were all super laser focused on making this sustainable from day one, because there's no fun, right? So there's no fun in actually burning money and actually directionless burning money. So we wanted to create value and do like small minimum viable tests, experiment very, very fast, and actually create value. So what we believe is that when we're creating value for the customer, when we're creating value for the restaurant, like the demand side and the supply side, there is definitely going to be willingness to pay. So even before we took this huge plunge, like you mentioned, earlier, like we were stable in our careers. So the reason why we took this plunge was because we first tested the idea out. We were like, okay, so there was willingness to pay even before we started doing this. And then, we started off with a paper card that we showed you guys earlier this year. So yeah, so that's when restaurant owners were like, hey, yeah, we do want our menus to be digitized. We do want to know what our customers like. We do want to know what they don't like. We do want to know how to actually grow this business, because we can't do this alone. So that's when we realized, okay, so like on our canvas, we listed everything that's going to burn money directionless, and then everything that's actually going to create value, which is going to create immediate value. So that's how we want to take it forward. We're going to take it forward by doing things that we create value, we get paid for it, we use that money to actually, we reinvest that into the business. Then, that's when we raise money to actually grow and not actually be clueless about what, we're going to do next.
Yeah. No, and that's good, because I think both Razi and I, here in Singapore, eating out is like a national pastime. So I could personally resonate with what you were trying to do. And when we visited Pakistan recently, nearly everything was revolved around going out to eat and enjoying the food, and just basically everybody does that. It's just a national pastime. And the big problem that we've all noticed as well, even here in Singapore, restaurants are all trying to run their own loyalty programs. They all give you this paper card that you have to stamp. Like you buy 5 lattes, you'll get the 6th one for free. You get a 10th latte for free, but you always forget the card. You always leave it in your other jean pocket. And for me, that was just kind of useless. And I remember thinking, it'd be great. I always take my phone with me everywhere. It would be great if I can just tap and pay. And Starbucks have done that with their Starbucks loyalty card. But having something that covers a number of different restaurants and generates that ecosystem of loyalty and reward points is lacking in general. Not just in Pakistan, but in general. We've seen things like entertainer. So I could personally understand the problem statement that you were going for, and I think European investors might not see it because I think, especially in the UK, going out is kind of like a rare thing to do when you go out to eat. It's not something that you do every day. But in places like Singapore and Southeast Asia, South Asia, eating out is part of a national hobby. To convince the regular user to go into a particular restaurant is a key problem statement that every restaurant owner has. I could understand it. I think European viewers might not because it's not something that's common to them. I think North American users would probably understand they eat out a lot more often than their European counterparts.
Since you mentioned Starbucks, right, Osman? I think just a couple of days ago, maybe when we did the previous episode with Patton's pitch deck, I saw that Starbucks actually, I found this article, and Starbucks holds more cash than some banks in the US. So they have like a US, I think $1.5 billion that they are holding. Essentially what happens is when you have the Starbucks card, right? I mean, you top it up because you eventually going to spend it at Starbucks. But what they have done, what the consumers have done, is they've given Starbucks $1.5 billion in cash at 0% interest. And a lot of people, they end up losing the card, they end up not spending it, and that becomes like free money for Starbucks. So I thought that's quite clever. And just to add that.
Yeah, it's an unintended consequence, like a latte is like $4.99 and you put $10 on the card and then there's like a dollar left on the card. You know what, I can't be bothered. And if you do that to enough cards, you end up with $100 million just in leftover cash that people don't want, which is quite interesting. So in terms of when we first started talking to you, you'd just done the MVP, the minimum viable product with the paper card. You've proven that there's a demand for this product. Where are you now, and what are your key challenges to date?
We've launched the MVP. It got rolled out in the month of April. So the minimum viable app that we have is now 2 months old. We have experienced more than 100% month-over-month growth. Just for context, we have processed over $30,000 in transactions on the app. And then, we're learning new things every day. And then, so basically we realize, okay, so there's different kinds of problems for different kinds of restaurants. If there's a small restaurant, we mentioned Starbucks earlier. Now, Starbucks is super popular. There's a new restaurant run by a student who just graduated out of college. And, it's a donut shop, for example. So the person knows how to make great donuts, but does he also need to hire data analysts? Does he also need to hire growth marketing managers? Does he also need to understand how to nail the branding, how to communicate it to people? And the biggest problem is how to acquire new customers. If the donut shop would have an app of his own, who would download it? People don't want to download 200 apps. People don't want to collect reward points for 200 different things. That's where we come in. So we essentially, what we're now doing is that think of the app as a mall, as a shopping mall, and then there's different storefronts inside for everyone. So if you're a small restaurant, if you're a big restaurant, there's a storefront there waiting for you. And then we're doing the tailor-made marketing for, depending upon what your size is, what your best products are. We're also helping you get ratings, like you can, if you've eaten a food, like you mentioned, entertainer, all the other apps that offer flat discounts are basically offering vouchers, and you just eat them and you go. So the rewards are the same for every single one. What we essentially want to do is we want to handhold growth, and then what we want to do is we say, the best rewards are supposed to be for the best customers. And the best customers are those customers who visit more frequently and are also basically contributing the most value to the business. So basically, it's a win-win-win model. So that's what we're doing. So coming back to the question that you asked, Usman, right? So currently our app is a fully functioning digital menu, dynamic loyalty program app, whereby every storefront on the app, it gets to reward their customers dynamically, which means there's different rewards. If the four of us go to a restaurant and use the Pattern app right now, all four of us are going to see different rewards, which is being given by the restaurant in order to change our behavior in a way that it benefits the restaurant the most and also creates value for us. So it's not going to be like, let's say, Usman and Razi go to this coffee shop or this restaurant 20 times in a month and they're super regular. They're actually contributing a lot to their revenue. And Wajeeh and myself, we just went there 2 times in a month. And then all four of us get the same rewards. So that's unfair on Usman and Razi. And then that gives them no incentive to actually bring more people in, become brand ambassadors for that particular restaurant, and then grow, help it grow. Because as soon as that flat discount is going to go, all of us are going to, go away because we were getting the same discounts anyway. So yeah, I hope that answers your question about where we are at the moment.
Okay, and I think the next question coming from that really is around the defensible moat that you have, and the customer acquisition. The customer acquisition in this case being both on the supply side and the demand side. How do you go about doing that, and how is that going to be scalable as well? Because I think I can't remember how many restaurants there are in Pakistan, but in Lahore, for example, there seems to be a restaurant in every street corner. How are you going to be able to scale that recruitment activity both on the demand side and the supply side?
So it's interesting that was something that we both, Wajeeh and myself, we discussed with you guys when we first spoke, and then we had a plan, right? But yeah, when the rubber hits the road, it's like sometimes a totally different ball game altogether. But in our case, like we were lucky in terms of that. We used to, we had a playbook. We had developed a small playbook, of course, iterative, to keep acquiring restaurants, go give them a pitch, and then keep acquiring customers, because customer we weren't too worried about because it's a discount hungry market. And if a restaurant wants to actually give you rewards for coming back sooner, people were going out anyway, right? So people want to discover new restaurants. People want to discover, it's like, because, like we mentioned earlier when we talked, dine-in experience has been the same since like decades. So digital menu, we realized, when there's better photography on the app, people really like to actually see that, to have a changed experience about actually ordering through the app. And then, even the waiting staff at the restaurant, they're super excited because they feel like they're being educated, they're being upgraded in terms of technology. So we've had a good solid word of mouth. Everything that we had planned about acquiring new customers, turns out we've got 20 restaurants on the platform right now. In the last 60 days of the app coming out, and all those 20 restaurants are inbound leads, and we've got I think, Wajeeh, a pipeline of 50 more restaurants that want to come on board. But what we're doing is we're actually acquiring restaurants, actually creating impact for them, because it's easier said than done. It's a total tailor-made strategy for each of our partner restaurants, where we want to understand what's their best menu item, what do we want to market, what do we want to show to customers, how do we want to pull people in. And actually when those folks start experiencing the impact, like for example, just to share top line numbers, alhamdulillah, we've just since April and May, we've managed to grow the net profit, after cutting the discount, after cutting our 5% revenue share that we take, the restaurants have earned on average, seen an increase of 25% in their net profits month over month. And essentially what we want to do is we want to keep it at least 15% month over month. We want to keep increasing their net profits. So yeah, so we're taking it slow. There's a lot of inbound because restaurant owners, it's like a very close-knit society. One restaurant owner knows 5 more restaurant owners, and then there's also a FOMO effect over here, because everyone wants the pattern app now. We keep hearing on the helpline, we've got our own numbers, like the founding teams. So because we don't have like a customer support helpline in place at the moment, so we keep getting inbound leads by restaurant owners who went to one of the pattern restaurants and said, hey, I run a cafe as well. I want, how do I get this thing over here? So yeah, so that's going great.
Okay, so your cost of acquisition is actually really non-existent. If you could argue that it literally you got your pipeline built from word of mouth.
Yes, just to add on to that, Usman, so a lot of restaurants that we're already working with, so they are based in a lot of cities as well. So the top 3 cities in Pakistan, Karachi, Lahore, Islamabad. So for example, if we're working with a great chain that is based in Lahore, there's a 90% chance that they exist in Karachi and Islamabad as well. So it becomes easier from that point onwards, that when you go and launch Karachi or when you go and launch Islamabad, they are already on board because they've seen that value. And in fact, we've been getting questions that, hey, when are you launching Karachi, for that matter, right? So, and I think it's only a matter of couple of days or weeks, perhaps, where we can just go in and start capturing these other markets as well.
That's great.
Actually, I had a question around scalability. I was again looking at some old articles that I read online from Yahya, and we're talking about growth and scalability, right? So when you talk about the 50 restaurants that are there on the waiting list and how everyone, I understand that, we need to really focus on each restaurant at a time, figure out what their pain points are, what is the most important item on the menu, and how can you design something for them that will work for them on pattern. But the question then is, when you want to scale this across all the thousands of restaurants in Pakistan, will this then become that bottleneck that all startups fear, that hinders the scalability?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, but that's again then how you think about the external markets as well, right? So lucky for us, we've always been big believers of actually doing things right, rather than actually rushing to actually forcefully grow in the middle of it, not create value for anybody, and actually have. It's good to have 20 happy customers in a month rather than have 2,000 unhappy customers, because that's like a company killer. So what we want to do is obviously we want to keep growing really fast, but sustainably fast. So what we do is we obviously plan to actually continue the course that we mentioned. We believe it's not going to be a blocker, because of course you keep expanding the team that way, and then you keep actually improving your technology stack in a way that it's easier to onboard, and it's we're obviously going to focus on self-empowerment, whereby maybe somebody at the restaurant can it's easier, the time to actually go live on the app keeps coming down. So that's something that Wajeeh is super focusing on. The product is growing at great speeds, alhamdulillah. And then, that's what we essentially plan on doing. So far, I think we don't see any trouble in that regard.
I think when you answer it that way, it's very reassuring for me. You're right. You have, you're going to scale it slowly at the moment, and then later on, once you've figured out the process, in the future, like you said, restaurants can onboard themselves. They would know what is the best item, and they can make amendments as they go along in their journey with pattern. So I think one of the really interesting stories with pattern, and if you could explain it to us really quickly, right? And I think it'd be very helpful for the other founders who watch this, or future founders, around creating the MVP. So you talked about that card, and I think Osman mentioned the card. We know the story, but maybe we could just share it with anyone who's watching this. Like, how did you create that MVP, which is a card, and then eventually come out of the app? I think that'd be an interesting, inspiring story for other future founders.
Yeah, I think that's again something that we all learned. So the 5 founding team members, all of us were at Dastgyr, and then the credit goes entirely to the founders at Dastgyr, because generally it's easier to always be in a place that whenever any upcoming founders are thinking about creating a company and actually creating value, it's easier for human beings to start thinking that, hey, if I had a product, if I had a working product, it would be easy for me to do that. That's not true at all. It's not going to be easy that way. So we learned it at Dastgyr, and we realized that whenever you want to experiment something, you do a minimum viable test, and then you just think about the fact like, okay, so what's my hypothesis? My hypothesis is that restaurants are in trouble, customers want better value, and if I can create a platform, if I can connect these people in, restaurants are sometimes underutilized and they would start paying, for it. So there's a story to it. So basically what we started doing was we started talking to restaurant owners, and then we realized that, they had open, empty tables. And then when we asked restaurant owners that, what they can do to actually fill them up, they had no answer to it. They were like, we can't do anything. We just hope and pray that somebody will walk in. Otherwise, we're going to go underutilized. Now, the payroll remains the same. The rental remains the same. The electricity bills are, piling up. But the restaurant revenue is actually, there's more potential revenue that they could have earned, but they can't, right? So then we also talked to owners, and we were like, I remember we were sitting at a small tea stall in the Johor town area of Lahore, and then we asked the restaurant owner that, okay, so what if we could actually pull people back, magically pull some people in here, and they would eat. Are you willing to offer any discount? The owner was super willing for that. And then he also shared one example that there are some social media influencers. What they do is they charge you a huge sum of money. And then, what they do is they use their following, and then they say, hey, there's a 20% off on Saturday at this particular place. What that does is hundreds of people show up, avail that 20% off. The influencer gets more followers, and then boom, they're gone. And the restaurant owner still does not have no connection. He does not know the names of the people who came in, what they ate, what they liked, what they did not like, how to actually pull them back again. So that's not repeatable. So that's when we realized that, okay, so let's test it out. Let's actually print a card. And there were different things. So there were 5 restaurants on the card, and it said 10% off if you come once. The card was only valid for 1 month, 30 days. 10% off if you come once, 20% off if you come twice, and 20% off plus a free dessert if you come thrice. So that's how we tried testing. Turns out, I think I might not remember the numbers now, but like more than 50% of the cards had all stamps filled. Because people started coming again because, hey, the next time I go to the same place again, I'm also going to... So everyone wanted to be rewarded more. And then what that did was that, somebody who would only come in once and never come back again, or probably do not even remember, actually started coming again. Of course, we did not have push notifications. We did not have marketing. We couldn't actually do anything to pull them back. The increasing discounts for coming back sooner itself was a motivation. All we did was we used to call people up and we were like, hey, do you remember that card? You want to use it again because you've got a better discount. Turns out the conversion was pretty good. So yeah, that's the story about the card.
Really, really interesting. Then how did you manage to get the paper card users? Like, were these friends and family, or who
friends and family?
Okay.
We used to just eat their heads like, okay, so you want to float this farm, we really want to build this company, you need to try this out. Back then it was like all just, help us. It was like big screaming, help us. So yeah, that's how it worked.
Yeah, I mean, and just going on to that, now that you've moved into the whole digital app now and you've got this app available, how are you, what metrics are you actually tracking on this new app? I mean, the ones which really jump out for me are going to be active user measurement. How do you measure who's an active user? Is it somebody who comes in back to that same restaurant once a month, once a week? Or is it somebody who's using the app across multiple restaurants through your app? How are you defining that active user? How are you tracking them? And what other metrics are you measuring that actually matter?
I think the most important metrics, of course, we would tie it with the value creation. So we see that, what kind of revenue are we generating for each of the partner restaurants? Then we look at what kind of retention are we driving for each of the partner restaurants? Somebody who visited a particular restaurant once, how many times are they visiting it again? So, and then of course on the platform side, we're measuring the platform retention, which keeps growing up as we keep adding better restaurants, and that keeps going up with time. We're measuring the platform retention. We're measuring the platform active users. An active user is somebody who has placed at least once order in a lifetime. That's the active user base. We then track like the monthly active user base as a percentage of the total active user base. We want to keep it higher. So yeah, those are some of the metrics that come top of mind. Wajeeh, do you want to add anything on top of it?
Yep, I think that's it. And so we're also closely targeting the average order value, because this is something that the restaurants are quite worried about. Because generally, if you look at these aggregators, the chances of you ordering a huge volume sitting at your home, that's quite less. And the total take rate, if that is subtracted by that delivery aggregator taking out that take rate, the net sum for that restaurant and the cost of serving that order for that restaurant, that goes high. So our average order value, it is in the north of $15, and that is our North Star metric, that once we have studied that customer, how do we then engage or incentivize them to actually spend more on that restaurant. So that restaurant owner is now beginning to understand that the discount slab that they have offered to these customers and the value that is coming through the Patron app is that they now understand what actually this certain persona of this customer wants to order, and how do we then sell on top of that, right? So if someone who likes a main course, how do you sell desserts to them? How do you sell appetizers to them? So that actually helps them not only boost their volumes, but also, quick turnover for inventory, cutting down those costs as well. That is something which we're actively, and yes, again, the frequency of the customers, how soon are they coming back to the same restaurant? And that is something that is very important, because that is the loyalty model. If you look at it, anyone could generate volume based on the discounts that they're offering through a platform by cutting down all the net margins and profitability angle. But the essential metric is that how soon are you sending these people back? So their average order frequency is something that is kept at the top of our dashboards.
For the restaurants, in your complexity landscape, you were talking about how you provide the restaurant customer analytics. How is that being presented at the moment? Is that through the restaurant app itself, or do they log onto a website and pull those statistics down, or do you have like a customer success manager that calls them up and walks them?
So honestly, Usman, at this stage, we're literally using all possible means to actually show value to the restaurant owner. So, for example, the restaurant app itself, it's quite intuitive in a way that even if a layman opens it up, they understand the total customer base that they've served, the total number of orders that they've processed, the total revenue that they've generated, and their loyalty percentage, right? So we're tracking all those, showing them right in huge thumbnails right at the application, right? Then there's also an option for these restaurant owners to log into a certain portal, enter their credentials. They can play around with data as well. But at this stage, we have dedicated customer success agents who are basically pulling out this data and showing them to the restaurant owner that, hey, so for example, again, it varies. So for example, a coffee shop owner may want to know what are the top selling drinks, right? But at the same time, another restaurant, which is, let's say, a fine dine restaurant, may want to know what are some of the underutilized hours at their restaurant. So it varies from restaurant to restaurant, and that's why we've put in these team members who are basically extracting this relevant data and then presenting them, be it in the form of PDF or a PowerPoint or WhatsApp, whatever that owner wants.
Right. Okay. And you've got 20 restaurants now with 50 planned in the pipeline. What would success look like for you in 12 months?
I think just to answer this in another way, I think we're essentially targeting to launch the major markets in Pakistan. That includes Karachi, Lahore, and Islamabad. Again, KLI, majority of the urban population lives here. Majority of the top chain restaurants are in these three cities. So that is our first goal, to launch these multiple markets. And number two, we essentially want to be having more than 500 to 1,000 restaurants on the application, because that is that. And this is, I'm quoting on the lower side, because we could just go out and start onboarding these restaurants, pull in a couple of delivery features and everyone starts to use a delivery app once again. But that would be something which we essentially don't want to create at this point in time. We want to be focused on building that loyalty element in, and then replicate this to different categories as well. So, like we mentioned with you guys as well, that the focus right now is to nail down the restaurant market. But if you see the overall loyalty and overall retention platform, the problem is way beyond the brick and mortar restaurants. It is there with brick and mortar apparel shops, salons, toy shops, you name it, right? So any brick and mortar business in Pakistan faces the exact same problems which these restaurants do, right? So we definitely want to open up one or two new categories as well and distribute this product to there as well. So we've started narrowing it down to the restaurant industry and then add a couple of new categories as well in the next 12 months.
Interesting. So the question was really around the competitive landscape. Initially you're looking at restaurants and dining in, but if you open up to apparel and open up to other brick and mortar stores, your competitive landscape is opening up to the likes of Daraz and Dastgyr even, right? Where they're going to tell you, don't go to the shops, you just order everything, we get it delivered at home. Happy days, right? So your competitive landscape has changed. How are you looking to address that both for day one and moving forward?
Yeah, so you're right. So the industry or the nature of the shops might be the same, but the angle that we're sort of addressing the problem from is totally different. So basically, the competitive landscape at the moment, with restaurants being there, so there's no prevalent dine-in player that we think of as a proper competitor, because technically nobody in the restaurant. So there are people who come and say that, hey, you can get a white labeled app made, which are models that are actually working really, really well in the United States. There's lunchbox.io, and so something very similar to us is Pop Menu, which basically just digitizes or revamps your restaurant website and actually improves the menu and helps you grow your customers. So the essential problem statement is mostly the same. However, in a hyper-local context, Pakistan customers do, like I mentioned, we've got small restaurants, we've got small joints. They don't have a website of their own. They don't know how to make a website. So the market in the American countries and in the Pakistan country, the dynamics is super different. So there are competitors who come and say, okay, hey, so an aggregator is ripping you off. Why don't you make an app of your own? And the restaurant owner, would think, okay, fine, that's great, and then I can do my own delivery, or I can just route it through a third-party delivery aggregator, and then I'll start getting orders, and I don't need to give that 35 or 40% take rate on any order. Once that happens, we've talked to restaurant owners who are actually using white label solutions. They go okay, but now I don't get as many orders that I did on an aggregator. So that's because the aggregated platform has millions of users, whereby your particular restaurant app will not have, it's hard to get even 1,000 users on that because people don't want multiple apps again. So in the current scheme of things, we don't see a hardcore competitor, a direct competitor at the moment. And even when we go to the brick and mortar space, there hasn't been a player in Pakistan who has come and said, because then again, Pakistan, 220 million population, growing rapidly, is like a beast of its own and with different dynamics. Probably the only country which has similar dynamics is maybe Bangladesh. Generally, investors and VCs try to that itself has now changed, but generally people have perception that Pakistan is similar to Indonesia. It's generally not, because from the numbers perspective it might be, but the dynamics and the social fabric, it's super different. So even when we enter the different industries, there hasn't been any technology player. And then again, it's not like it's actually it's not that it's been too long since the technology revolution has started happening. Probably the first time when we saw Airlift actually coming in and creating that impact was 2019. And then, 2019, there was COVID, and now we're in 2022. So like it's a super nascent ecosystem at the moment. And we believe like we're probably going to be the first players to actually go tell brick and mortar restaurants that, hey, we're going to handhold you and then bring customers to you, give you a storefront, and actually help you increase your revenue, give you those insights. So technically all the other, like you mentioned, Daraz. Daraz is basically asking sellers, get yourself listed here, and then people can just order stuff directly from there. But like, what about hair salons where you actually have to be there? And then, but people go there once and then they never come back. And even like the brick and mortar store market is still like super big. People who have not actually become Daraz sellers. That's like the beauty of this ecosystem. Like there's multiple players coexisting. All of them are growing at unprecedented speeds because the market is super big.
And we were talking about the ecosystem being very nascent. But what's changed in the time from 2019 to where you are now? What are the big challenges that you've seen in that short period of time? So I think there's two elements to this question. One is just a general view of how things have changed since 2019 to where you are now. And then, obviously, since things have changed, what's the market reaction to buy now, pay later as well? So there are two questions in that.
Right. So essentially, Usman, the reason why we wanted to offer a buy now, pay later solution is that in Pakistan, even with all the fintechs coming in, there is still a lot of room. There is a massive opportunity to basically increase the financial inclusion, right? Bank the unbanked. Businesses as of today, and this is something that we were executing in Dastgyr day in, day out with the buy now, pay later product for the retailers, right? And that is when we actually saw the volumes going up, retailers making more frequent purchases, they getting better margins because there was a slight shift in how they were actually purchasing, because then they started to procure off-season items to sell them when the season comes in, right? And that same problem can be replicated here in these smaller restaurants as well. So you see these chains such as McDonald's, KFC, they do not have these financial limitations to go and launch a new product or launch a new bakery, right? But at the same time, someone who makes really great donuts and are based in Defense, but then now they want to launch in the other part of the city, that is where that problem comes in. And even when we as a platform are promising them demand, when we are saying that, hey, if you get listed on our platform, we are going to bring that extra user base to your restaurant. Now, to cater to that demand, they need that extra source of finance as well, because how are they going to source that inventory, right? They need to serve these different customers that are now coming in through Pattern. So that is where this product comes in. That is where the buy now, pay later solution comes in to actually help these restaurant owners increase their working capital and then spend to cater their customers better. Maybe cut down different menu items, launch a new menu item. If we can tell them through data that, hey, you are essentially placed in a locality where there's no ice cream parlor, right? So probably they can start offering ice cream as well, but now they want to invest in that sort of machinery. We can actually help them buy it or lease it, right? So that is number one. Number two, again, I think the overall confidence in the ecosystem at this point in time, that has slightly gone, you could say it has taken a different direction. But if we see that SadaPay, when they got their license just 1 month ago, they have raised more than $17 million, right? And I think that confidence is not only in the team, but the kind of product offering that they're building, the kind of ecosystem that they're building. And I think the same applies to us as well. If we are actually going out there in the market and not actually burning money, just like Yahya said, directionless burning of money, that is going to take us nowhere, right? So we essentially want to be then positioned in a way that, hey, we disbursed X amount of money to these restaurants. This was an additional source of revenue that the company was able to generate. this has increased our chances of going break even, or you could say this has increased our chances of and has given us a clear path to profitability. That is then something which the investors and the general, you could say the stakeholders would then start believing in, right? Again, as of right now, this is something on paper, and we are yet to decide if this is something that we want to do it on our own through our own loan book, or let's say partner up with someone, because there are a lot of players right now in the market. You see a lot of these fintech and buy now pay later players coming in. So yes, this is something that is planned towards the first quarter of 2023. So we're yet to see the results.
So the question, when we look through the pitch deck, and it mentioned here that you're raising $450,000 US dollars. So we'd like to know, like, what is the valuation at this point of time?
Yep. So the valuation is $3.5 million, and now we are in a post MVP stage. We have processed more than 30,000 US dollars of transactions on our platform in 60 days. The number of orders, the active users, that is continuously growing week on week. So now we have decided to put this valuation and entertain any sort of checks that are coming in at $3.5 million.
And you, from the $450,000 that you're raising, how much still remains?
So we still have a room for 150K. That is what we're aiming. So we are in advanced stage talks with a lot of investors, but at this point in time, until the safes are signed or until the money is moved in our bank, the room still remains open, and that's why we still have a cushion of 150K.
Got it. And you mentioned that you're raising it via a safe note, right?
Yep. So it's the standard Y Combinator safe note that we're using.
And also the company is incorporated in Singapore.
Yep. So it's incorporated in Singapore, and that's why we've had your confidence in putting it. Osman and Mustafa both had this. I think it clicked the right way when we were incorporated in Singapore. That just adds a lot of investor confidence.
And how do you plan to use the money? Like with the funds raised, what kind of a runway would that give you, and what do you plan to use the money for?
Right. So I think this money, again, quite recently, Y Combinator also issued a statement advising founders how to navigate through this economic distress and how to, become the cockroaches of the corporate world, right? So that is something that we have in mind, and that is how we essentially want to use these funds as well. We will have a conservative runway of almost 18 to 24 months, and that is what we had in mind, because again, since we are a SaaS platform, we do not spend a lot on logistics, first mile, last mile, warehousing, rider salaries and everything. So again, our biggest expense column is the product that we're offering, the tech side, the tech and product. As you know, tech talent in Pakistan or generally in the globe, the demand is quite high, and so we see a bump in their salaries as well. So, and again, the product plans that we have are quite ambitious. We are creating something that hasn't existed in the market before, especially in Pakistan. So majority of our dollars are going towards the product and tech side, and then since we want to scale this to different cities, like I mentioned, then we need to spend on expansion, hiring the right people, hiring the right talent. Again, other startups having a lot of money in their pockets as well, so that also puts you in a talent war. So you want to have that right talent on board and then train them and work closely with them to capture the market faster. And then there are certain other expense headers which the business generally requires, but yes, these two are the top two columns.
I think the opportunity to work with you and Yahya should already be quite attractive for the talent, right? I mean, you guys scaled Dastgyr up, so probably there's definitely a lot to learn, and that could be one way to also attract talent to the startup. So then the question is, now with all this angel investing, an angel investor puts in the money, or investor puts in the money with the hope of some return. So in terms of the exit strategy, or what a potential angel investor can expect in like 3 to 5 years, how does that look like?
So I think the market is generally growing like super fast. Since we're in the SaaS industry, it's the valuation multiples are going to really skyrocket. And in the next 2 to 3 years, we expect any investment coming in at this point in time to grow by at least 10 to 20x. That's like a conservative estimate. And then the plans are ambitious, and it can go up to like 50, 100x as well. But yeah, like being super conservative, SaaS multiples are getting back up, and I think also Usman and Razi, like I think you guys can weigh in on that as well, in terms of how the landscape is looking like. Like sustainable businesses are back in demand. If you're creating value, you're not burning a lot of money, people really want to put money in, especially, in the midst of the economic downturn. A lot of the investors who used to be really putting money in a lot of the high burn models have suddenly just backed out, and we've started having those conversations. Now we're more focused on the fundamentals, because previously at, even Series A, Series A people used to expect, like, I'm now thinking about finding product market fit. Now, like, we're at the pre-seed stage and people are like, okay, so you how close are you to finding product market fit? So again, we expect, the external markets are in nobody's control, but what we believe is that, the returns are definitely super lucrative considering the opportunity that we're at.
I mean, and from my perspective, just looking at some of the things now, normally I don't normally invest this early into a startup. So I'll make that very clear to anybody else watching. I'm normally looking for proven traction before I want to put money in. So even though I would call it early stage, there's got to be traction. And at that time, the only traction we had was from your paper card, right? And it's unusual. Now so I'm gonna call this out, because most people will ask me as an angel, what makes you like so confident about a particular startup? The numbers are a bit weak, and that's even when they've got traction. The numbers are a bit weak, they don't really look that great. Why are you investing? And pretty much all the time, I always say it's about the founder. Do I believe the founder? Do I trust them? Do I think that this team has got longevity, right? Because they're going to have problems. And like you mentioned, as soon as the rubber hits the road, that's when you realize that there's a problem. And, you can have all the big plans, but everyone has a plan until they get punched in the mouth. I think Mike Tyson said that, right? And this is exactly it. When I looked at the team that you'd built for this particular operation, it gives me a lot of confidence. You're not going to be bickering amongst yourselves, because you already know each other and you've got a vision, you've got an idea of what needs to be delivered, you have a very clear view on how to execute. And so for me, that also tells me that, that gives me more confidence. That's the pattern I was looking for, to coin the term. The pattern here was around the founders. And so even though we didn't have a really established proven traction, what you had as a foundational team means that you can handle the problems, deal with them, move forward and deliver. And even before all this stuff kicked off with the Y Combinator note saying, hey guys, you need to build out a long runway and all this kind of stuff, that we've known for a while anyway. But what was important was, even when we were having those discussions before, you were talking about wanting to build something that was sustainable, right? And that you needed to have a path to profitability. So it wasn't just, I know that you had a view that, yeah, we can raise and we'll raise again and we'll raise again. But even then you were able to handle that problem, right? So you already had an idea. How can we extend our runway? How can we build this product? How can we scale it, grow it, and be profitable at the same time? And that gave me enough confidence to kind of come in way earlier than I'd normally come in. And I think people need to really have a look at that. When you look at the team that you built, you're all familiar with each other, right? Which is good. That for me is the pattern that I was looking for.
No, absolutely. On this point, like Usman, like we'd also we were super grateful to have some of the most strategic investors from across the world, join us, including yourself. We were lucky in that regard as well. We've got a very diverse set of investors, and everybody adds their own unique value, and the trust that the current investors have on us is because and we're very grateful for that, and then we're very confident and very hopeful that inshallah we'll be able to deliver in that regard as well, because everybody has put so much trust in us that they're like, okay, so you guys know the market, and then you guys know that if a problem comes up, you guys know the nuance, you guys know the context, and you guys are going to figure it out. So having people like that from across the world back you is also a really big confidence. And a lot of the decisions, a lot of the things that we get right is because of the advice that we keep getting informally on different calls here and there with all of our investors. So we're very grateful for that as well.
Yeah, and we can also tell that you've got a really good established network of people, because every time I mention you in a LinkedIn post, there's like 50 people from Dastgyr will actually view that post. So we know that you've got a following even from the people that you used to work with. So you've got quite a reputation as well behind you. Okay, if people want to put money in and they want to have a look at that safe note, what's the best way for them to reach you?
If someone wants to, reach out through an introductory email or something, so they can first use the email and then we can set up a call later.
Just for everybody listening as well, what would the minimum ticket be for the remainder of the round?
So the minimum ticket size would be $15,000 at this point in time.
Okay.
For the extension of our round, yeah.
And just to link this up with the previous conversation, the kind of people that we're actually looking to onboard at this point in time. So just like Osman, yourself, and other investors that we have, they are quite strategic in nature, and we have always preferred what that person brings to the table apart from the money, right? That is something that we have been quite, you could say, diligent about, because it's not always about money. You could find a lot of money through family offices and people who would just come in, park their money for a couple of years and then see what's the return like and then just exit. But the kind of strategic importance, having the right connections, having the right network, that is something that we've always prioritized, people who have had previous experience of operating. So that is something. And since we want to build a pure tech play, pure SaaS product, people who have had that relevant experience working with technology, that is something that we really value at this point in time.
Okay, that's good to know.
Thank you, Yahya and Wajeeh, for joining us for this episode of The Clueless Capitalist. So you've heard from the co-founders of Pattern, an exciting new startup that's coming up from Pakistan. So if you're interested in investing, you can contact both Yahya and Wajeeh via the emails, which we'll be sharing later on the screen. And if you enjoyed this episode, please remember to comment, like, and subscribe. And we look forward to seeing you on the next episode.
Thanks, guys. Thank you.